Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. This is designed specifically as a judicial toolkit for presiding judges and legal professionals. When you're sitting on the bench, evaluating complex scientific evidence is, without a doubt, one of your most critical tasks. So today, we're focusing on forensic anthropology. It's a fascinating discipline that literally translates the silent language of skeletal remains into robust legal evidence. We're going to look at exactly how these experts validate their findings for legal testimony, what their limitations are, and what specific questions you should be asking them when they take the stand in your courtroom. To help you navigate this complex field, here's our roadmap. We'll cover defining the anthropologist's remit, triage and the biological profile, trauma and taphonomic environments, modern imaging in court, complex investigations and synergy, and finally, assessing reliability and standards. Starting with Section 1, defining the anthropologist's remit and establishing those boundaries. So the absolutely crucial point for the bench is this clear distinction. A forensic anthropologist is not a forensic pathologist. In most jurisdictions, pathologists are medical doctors who determine the official cause and manner of death. Anthropologists, on the other hand, are specialists with advanced degrees who interpret trauma, circumstantial evidence, and identity strictly through bone biology. Honestly, if an anthropologist in your court starts declaring a definitive cause of death, they've likely stepped way outside their scientific lane. This formal definition brilliantly illustrates their exact scope. As defined by experts Mark Hesgrant and Roberts, forensic anthropology is used to identify both the living and the dead, to assist in the recovery of the deceased, and to interpret the precise circumstances surrounding death. It's really all about leveraging human biology, natural variation, and anatomy to bring factual, objective clarity to legal and humanitarian investigations. Moving on to Section 2, triage and the biological profile. This is the foundational evidence. When triaging foundational evidence, experts have to definitively answer three main questions. First, is the material actually bone? Second, is it human? They figure this out by looking at unique morphological features and biomechanical shapes that differ from animal bones. And third, is it of forensic significance? Meaning, do the remains fall within a legal time frame? For example, local dating cutoffs vary quite a bit. Denmark might use a 100-year rule, while Sweden uses a strict 1850 cutoff date to separate forensic cases from historical archaeology. Now, if the remains are deemed forensically significant, the expert constructs a biological profile. This encompasses biological sex, which is usually determined by pelvis morphology, age at death, assessed through skeletal development, stature, calculated from long bone measurements, and population affinity, often estimated using cranial metrics. Together, these four pillars act like a biological filter, allowing law enforcement to drastically narrow down extensive missing persons lists. But as a judge, you really need to scrutinize adult age at death estimations closely. Estimating the age of a juvenile is highly reliable, mostly because it's based on predictable growth markers like dental eruption and bone fusion. But evaluating adult age, that relies on joint degeneration, which is highly variable based on lifestyle and health. This often leads to a known statistical error called regression to the mean. Basically, older individuals are incorrectly estimated as younger, and younger adults are estimated as older. Always ask the expert about the confidence intervals of their adult age estimates. To supplement this profile, experts might analyze stable isotopes. You can think of isotopes as a chemical diary locked right inside the bone and teeth. Because we literally are what we eat and drink, isotopes can reconstruct aspects of a victim's life history. They can trace geographic origins, diet, and even a person's physical movement over the course of their life. It's a remarkably powerful tool for identifying unknown remains when traditional methods fall short. All right, Section 3, trauma and taphonomic environments, or how we interpret the bones. When assessing the post-mortem interval, the time since death, anthropologists rely heavily on taphonomic environments. They study how the body interacts with its surroundings, taking into account decomposition rates, insect activity, and microbial changes. It's really worth noting for international context that while the U.S. has several human taphonomy research facilities, you've probably heard them called body farms, Nordic countries currently lack them. So you must be acutely aware that experts in Northern Europe sometimes have to extrapolate data from entirely different climates when testifying about time of death. That requires careful judicial scrutiny. Crucially, when an expert presents skeletal trauma in your court, you've got to evaluate exactly how they timed that trauma based on biological responses. Ante-mortem injuries occurred before death and will show a biological healing response, like a bone callus, which takes multiple days to form. Perimortem trauma occurred around the time of death. It shows zero healing, but exhibits a green bone response, where the bone breaks with the elasticity of living tissue. Postmortem damage occurred after death, often snapping cleanly like dry wood, or showing signs of thermal alteration without any healing whatsoever. Let's move to Section 4, Modern Imaging in Court, and Presenting Clear Evidence. Historically, analyzing bone trauma meant maceration, literally, stripping away soft tissue. That destroys contextual evidence and, frankly, creates gruesome physical exhibits. Today, it's a completely different story. Tools like postmortem computed tomography, micro-CT, and surface scanning allow anthropologists to analyze trauma virtually. They can even use 3D printing to create pristine, exact physical models of a victim's fractured bones. These 3D models offer incredibly clear and non-gruesome evidence that can be safely passed around a jury box without causing undue distress or prejudice. And actually, these imaging techniques aren't just for the deceased. They're totally vital when anthropologists are called to evaluate living subjects. By using radiographs or MRI scans of the hand, wrist, or collarbone, experts can assess skeletal maturation to estimate a person's age. This is frequently utilized in sensitive child abuse investigations or immigration cases involving undocumented, unaccompanied minors where biological age holds immense legal weight. Now for Section 5, Complex Investigations and Synergy, specifically looking at mass fatalities. In mass fatality incidents, terrorist attacks, or investigations into international human rights violations, the sheer scale of fragmented and commingled remains is just overwhelming. An anthropologist doesn't work in isolation here. The recovery and identification process becomes a massive logistical operation, requiring strict scene processing protocols to ensure the chain of custody and evidentiary integrity are maintained from the mass grave all the way to the international tribunal. Doing this right requires immense interdisciplinary synergy. Anthropologists have to seamlessly network with forensic archaeologists to locate and excavate the graves, pathologists who handle the soft tissue, odontologists matching dental records, and geneticists running DNA. Together, they bring true scientific rigor to chaos, reaffirming the profound human rights dimension of this work, returning an identity, a name, and a history to the deceased. Finally, Section 6, Assessing Reliability and Standards. This is a practical guide for the bench. First off, you need to contextualize the expert's qualifications. International models, like those in the UK or the US, often mandate rigorous, formal certification requirements and professional registries. However, it's really important to note that in Nordic countries, for instance, there is currently no official requirement for certification to practice forensic anthropology. Instead, they rely on highly skilled but informal professional networks, like the Swedish Forensic Archaeological Network, to share expertise and develop skills. Regardless of the jurisdiction, though, foundational codes of practice dictate that these experts absolutely must continuously demonstrate current competency. Science moves incredibly fast, right? So you should feel completely empowered to ask the expert about their ongoing professional development, their current practice within the specific category of their testimony, and exactly how they stay updated on the latest peer-reviewed methodologies. Furthermore, you've got to ensure their submitted casework reports have undergone rigorous peer review. Before an anthropological report ever makes it to your desk or is read into the court record, its critical conclusions should have been checked and verified by another qualified expert. This minimizes subjective bias and ensures the methodology applied aligns perfectly with accepted scientific standards. And here is a really critical takeaway for evaluating a biological profile. You must demand standard errors. If an expert testifies that a victim was exactly 167 centimeters tall or exactly 28 years old, that's a massive red flag. Because these methodologies rely on biological variation, a reliable expert is always going to present a range, such as a stature of 167 centimeters plus or minus 3 centimeters. Absolute certainty in biology is super rare, and the language of the testimony has to reflect those statistical boundaries. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a thought about the future of this evidence. Modern research is now pushing way past the basic 4 pillars of the biological profile. Experts are beginning to analyze non-traumatic bone disease, medical implants, and even forensic toxicology trapped in bone matrices to create a vastly more detailed biocultural profile. This profile doesn't just tell us who someone was, but how they lived, their habits, and their health burdens. As these incredibly complex, deeply personal life histories written in bones start entering the legal system, we really have to ask, is your courtroom fully equipped and ready to evaluate them?